communities are the leaders that they go to for reassurance and direction for a way forward. And I know that that is hard for a lot of us right now. We are only human, and when we ourselves are struggling with kind of a roller coaster of emotions, that can be hard. I myself was kind of feeling that crisis of faith. I went to the Capitol. Vicki Goodwin invited me to an event, and 200 Texas Democrats showed up to learn how to advocate for issues they cared about as a Texas. We could be that inspiration for one another, because while I do not know where the Trump administration will take us, except nowhere good, I know one thing for certain, and that is that the fight for this country will be led by Democrats. And with the grace and the courage that is both our trademark and our heritage as Texas Democrats, as we all had the privilege to witness the amazing life of Cecile Richards, who we lost this week, who never, ever gave up the fight, not till the very end. We will fight to the end, and we will fight to win in 2026 and beyond. Because as Democrats, we have no choice but to fight to win in a state where we rank third to bottom in per student funding. I have a son who in fifth grade in public school a couple years ago did not get a fifth grade teacher. That is unacceptable. It is unacceptable that in a state that ranks amongst nations in riches and wealth, we have the largest percentage of uninsured children, uninsured veterans, and uninsured working people. And yes, we have to fight to win, because a real pro-life state does not let Texas women bleed out on bathroom floors because they cannot get the health care that they need, because politicians claiming some fake moral high ground are imposing those beliefs on women who are paid with their lives. And the thing is that this dystopian that 30 years of Republican control has created is not confined to just Texas. We will have an outsized influence on national politics here in a big way very soon. The Brennan Center, taking data from the U.S. Census Bureau, recent data predicts that by 2030, Texas stands to gain 4 and is within striking distance of gaining 5 congressional seats, which also means electoral votes. California loses 4, the blue states all lose. Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Rhode Island, they all lose. What does that mean? That means that it will be really hard to win nationally for Democrats without Texas. To put it another way, the fate of the union depends on Texas. And that is daunting, but also empowering. Because we know that out of all the battleground states in the last decade, Texas is gaining Democratic votes at a faster rate than any other battleground state. Now, Donald Trump is a destabilizing force, and last election cycle, we did trade places with Arizona, but they were funded like a battleground, and we never were. And even when it comes to legislative races, if you look at our results, yes, we lost ground just like everybody else did in this country, but we held our own against a red wave and mirrored the results of Arizona, again, a battleground state. Last election cycle, was chair of the House Democratic Campaign Committee. I will be chair of that effort next election cycle as well. And we are 14 seats away from a Democratic majority in a 150-member House. That is close. For the first time ever, we will continue our election efforts through this session. There are no off years. We understand the stakes. And so, what I'm here to say is there are reasons to have hope. There are reasons to get excited about Texas. And because we are gracious people, we invite the DNC and all of the candidates for DNC chair to join us in building a winner-take-all strategy that is about winning Texas. Because in Texas, we know our worth, and it's time that the rest of the country understood it as well. Thank you. Now I would like to introduce the Executive Director of the Texas Democratic Party, Monique, who has accomplished the coup of getting all three of the top candidates to Texas for our benefit. I don't know that any other state has accomplished this, so congratulations to Monique.
Like Gina said, my name is Monique Galpella. I'm the proud executive director of the Texas Democratic Party. I'm so happy to have all of you here today, and I just want to take a moment to say thank you and recognize our wonderful DNC members, our officers, Shay, Kendall, and the ones who are not here, and Lee, or sorry. And also some wonderful people who have been amazing supporters of me, Sharon Young and David Lee, and two individuals who are not here today, Marjorie and Seema, who did not bring their weather to get here. We believe they're safe. But again, thank you so much to the candidates for being here today. And I am so optimistic about everything here in Texas and also in the country. I'm sure all of you were depressed as I was the day after the election, and seeing all of you here today gives me so much hope and optimism for the future. So thank you again, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Tori DeVito.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tori Garrido, and I'm so pleased to be here. I'm so grateful for everyone for coming out. I am co-founder and president of Way to Win and advisor to Way to Lead, our members' political arm. We founded, I'm eighth generation Texan, y'all need to know. I was born in Dallas, my family's from Brownsville. I was raised in Houston, married into Midland, and I'm raising just tough Austin girls. And I cannot think of a better place for the DNC chair, the future DNC chair, to put forward their vision for Americans and fight for all Americans than right here in the state of Texas. We have been fighting valiantly for so long, and we have big heroes that we need to honor, and we will keep up the fight. This was not, the billionaires that just took over the Oval Office are not what our ancestors fought for. They're not what Barbara Jordan fought for. They're not what MLK fought for. They're not what Ann or Cecile Richards fought for. We are going to fight for a brighter future, and it starts with the DNC chair. And so I'm very grateful to Olivia Messer, who is the editor of Barbed Wire. She is going to moderate this conversation. She grew up in Houston like me. Cut her teeth in crime reporting out in Waco at the Texas Waco Tribune Herald. She has been a talented investigative journalist who's written for the Daily Beast award-winning cheat sheet newsletter and sat at the national desk. And she's published for Rolling Stone, Marie Claire, Slate, Texas Monthly, and the Texas Observer. So let's get to it. Olivia, please join us.
Hi.
Welcome.
I think our candidates should be on stage.
Thank you.
Get cozy, gentlemen. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, and welcome to those of us joining on the live stream. My name is Olivia Messer. I'm editor-in-chief of the Barbed Wire. We're a digital media company reporting on the food, music, people, culture, and politics of Texas. We're nonpartisan, but we're unapologetically progressive.
I'm an investigative journalist by background, and Tori stole my line that I am an eighth generation Texan, and I'm not just making that up because she said that herself earlier. I'm honored to be here moderating this important forum today. Before we begin, I'll share just a couple of housekeeping items. Our candidates will each have 1 minute for an opening statement. I'll then ask a series of questions of each candidate before we proceed to questions submitted by members of the audience if we have time. Candidates will have 90 seconds to respond to each question and a 30-second rebuttal period if needed when I ask point follow-up questions. Today's forum is co-hosted by the Texas Democratic Party and Wade Lee, who have each solicited questions from members of the Democratic National Committee of Texas, as well as from party activists. I've spoken to members of the DNC in advance of this forum, and I've got a couple questions of my own. These questions have not been provided to the candidates in advance. For our in-person attendees, you can submit your own questions to the candidates by using the QR code on screen. Our goal is to help members of the DNC make the most informed choice they can in advance of casting their votes for chair. But at the Bar Choir, we also believe deeply in making information about politics more accessible to average folks who don't live and breathe this stuff every day. To that end, I'll be digging in and asking you to use a little less jargon and a little more plain language as we talk about the stakes of this election. This forum is happening at a time when Democrats are coming off the disappointing 2024 general election, having lost both the presidency and control of the US Senate, while Republicans maintain control of the House. Many are asking, what did the Democrats do wrong and what can they do differently? There's a real hunger for both accountability and authenticity. Our candidates join me to talk about the future of the Democratic Party are Ken Martin, chair of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party, Mark O'Malley, former governor of Maryland, and then chair of the Wisconsin Labor Party. I know things got contentious at the Detroit Forum and have in the press since, so we appreciate the energy, but we will ask the candidates to be respectful of one another and our audience and our timekeeper. With that, let's begin. First, we'll go to Governor Martin O'Malley. Governor O'Malley, please share your 1 minute opening statement.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you all for caring so deeply about our country, about our party, and about this critical juncture that we find ourselves in. My name is Martin O'Malley. I'm the former mayor of Baltimore, former governor of Maryland. And most recently, I was asked by the president to go and turn around Social Security as it was headed towards a customer service meltdown. So I've had a lot of experience turning around big organizations. I'm alone among the candidates on this stage. I've run for office and been elected to office, and including after a recession. The time we find ourselves in right now as a party is a time that calls for a fresh pair of eyes. It is a change election, a time when we may need to make in rapid succession a number of changes so that we can win the next election and save the republic we carry in our hearts. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Chairman Whitaker.
Good evening. I'm Ben Wickler, the chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. For the last 6 years, I've been crisscrossing the country saying, if you care about the fate of American democracy, donate to Wisconsin, volunteer in Wisconsin, get involved. We've supersized our party and we've ungraded the state that Republicans have targeted with voter suppression, with union busting, with attempts at every way they could, with gerrymandering and everything else for total control. But now the front line of the fight for American democracy is Texas. There is no long-term future for Democrats to win national elections unless we do the kind of year-over-year building and investment and organizing, not just with the Democratic Party, but with the union movement, with our allies and partners, with this whole country, making Texas its cause. And I'm running for DNC chair because we need all of us to win the fights to stop the GOP from rigging this country against working people. If we do this together, and I'd be honored for your support, we can ensure that not only is there a blue Texas, but that Texas takes this entire country towards the kind of country that we all need it to be.
Chairman Whitaker.
Thank you so much. And we're all here obviously because of Monique and we love her so much, but let me tell you why we're really here, which is because Texas, to Ben's point, is absolutely critical to the future of winning the presidency, winning control of the Congress back. You heard Leader Hinojosa talk about this. The reality is this state is going to gain 4 to 5 congressional seats after the next reapportionment. 14 seats, 14 legislative seats. You break that trifecta, we can actually make sure we deliver the presidency, not just in this next presidency, but for years to come, given the size and importance of this state. So truly, the future of the Democratic Party, the future of our country goes right through Texas. That's why we're all here tonight. And we didn't come to any other state who invited us. We've actually only been in person, one other time for these forums. The reality is we're here tonight because we believe that the heart of this party beats in Texas and the future of our party goes right through this state. So thank you so much.
All right, for our first question, it's the single issue we've heard the most from members of the DNC in advance of this forum. Mr. Wickler, the Democratic Party has struggled with tension between building party infrastructure to compete in revenue states like Texas and focusing on the immediate political imperative to compete in traditional swing states like Pennsylvania and Arizona. How will you balance the need to spend the millions of dollars necessary to win in states that are competitive in 2026 and 2028 versus investing longer term in states like Texas?
The key, if we want to do both, and we have to do both, is that we need to expand the pie. We need a Texas-sized pie, the Democratic Party. And what that means is we need to inspire people to believe that it is worth donating to, volunteering with, getting involved in this party. That we're a party that actually fights and delivers results. And that means building plans that are credible. And that means working with our allies and partners. That means working hand in glove with the labor movement, working with grassroots organizations, working with Way to Lead, Way to Win, with Emerge, with all the groups that make up our ecosystem, and building a plan in each state that people can see how they are part of that battle plan. And then going out. And when Trump does something heartbreaking, shocking, outrageous, what he's doing right now, that we say, if you are furious about this, we have something for you to do. And that's what it's going to take. And that's what I'm excited about doing it from the DNC chair, is to explain how if you pour your heart and your soul and your energy into this party, that we can actually build something that can win tough elections in Texas and in former battleground states and in battleground Texas and in states that are a long way from being where Texas is in terms of the road to becoming purple and then blue. Every state has fights that if we push just a little bit further, we can win. Every state has a 10-year path to being able to create dramatic change. So we need to build a plan state by state, not a 50-state strategy, but 50 state strategies in a strategy in each territory. And then we need to inspire people to put themselves into that fight. Thank you.
Governor O'Malley, same question.
The key to our party's future is really that I think I want to incorporate all of the words that these other gentlemen said, but the biggest change that we need to make is actually to return to the economic issues, the concerns that people have, because that's true across every state. Texas is the key to this country's future. You all know the way the demographics are changing, you know the way the populations are changing, and you know the way the reapportionment will then shift electoral votes as well as congressional votes south. So we need to invest more in Texas. We need to make sure that we have the resources on the ground so that we can register voters, stay connected to communities. And that's what we need to do in order that we can have a party and put the brakes on Donald Trump within the next 2 years. Every day, we need to be punching back around the economic issues and defending the dignity of every single person in our country when he takes swings at them and undermines the very foundations of what it means to have a republic. I also want to acknowledge that we're joined by John Bryan, Representative John Bryan. And I had the honor to work for him when I was in college in his office in DC. And I mentioned before that former Governor Ben Lawrence is here. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Look, in Minnesota, our motto is built to win, built to last, right? It's an acknowledgement of the role of political parties. We have one single role. We are part of a larger movement of folks fighting for economic and social justice, of course, but the role of political parties is singular. It's to win. We have to win elections. But we do that by building to last as well. So we're not rebuilding infrastructure every 2 to 4 years, which is why I'm proud of the 57 state party strategy, which I wrote. An acknowledgement that if we're going to turn a red state to a purple state to a blue state, we have to invest time, energy, and money everywhere, not just in the battleground states, not just in the big states, but in all states, right? There's no such thing as a perpetual blue state, right? Ask Governor O'Malley then, right? Maryland had lost votes this year. A lot of our blue states lost votes because we're not investing in there anymore. Not because of him. My point is we have to invest everywhere. If we want to move and build a national party, my plan calls for us investing in all 3,244 counties throughout this country, an acknowledgement that we can't just focus on 7 battleground states anymore or just federal races. We have to contest races up and down the ballot. You see, the conservative movement in this country realizes that. They are exercising building power in every public policy arena in this country. Our indifference to school boards should tell us everything we need to know about what we have done wrong as a party. We cannot ignore places where public policy are being battled right now. We have to compete everywhere, and that's what I'll do as the next DNC chair.
Thank you. I want to get a little more specific on those answers. And I think that requires visiting our history. Has the DNC appropriately invested in Texas to date? And what do you mean? What does it look like to invest in Texas? Let's start with you, Chairman Martin.
The answer is no. The answer is no, they haven't. I mean, part of the reason, Monique could tell you, of course, is when they come and ask the DNC and others for, resources. Well, Texas is so expensive, so big, it's so expensive to compete. Sure, it is, right? But this is where we have been so myopic. When we start to think about what Gina Hinojosa just said about where the power is shifting out of the Midwest, out of the Northeast, out to the South, the fastest growing states in the country are all Southern states. North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, Florida, right? That's where the power is. So, I was in Mississippi with Brandon Presley 2 years ago. He was our candidate for governor down there. He's tied with the Republican Tate Reeves. I asked him, what more can the DNC do to be helpful to you in this moment? He said, years of indifference and disinvestment in southern states has led to this moment where I have to build everything myself because there's nothing on the ground there to help me. Now imagine if we had looked 10 years prior and saw that there are more African-American voters in Mississippi than any other state. We started doing what Stacey Abrams did in Georgia, registered and mobilizing those voters. We would have had something on the ground to help. That's the point. In Minnesota, we use a hockey analogy. You have to skate to where the puck will be, not where the puck is. We need to start skating to where the voters and the voting is going to be, and that's right here in Texas. We cannot disinvest any longer here if we want to change our fortunes as a party.
Chairman Rickler, same question. Has the DNC appropriately invested in Texas to date, and how can it do so more specifically?
The DNC has not, I agree with Chair Martin. And I think the country is not. Often Democrats nationally treat Texas as an ATM, where you go to raise money and then take it away instead of treating it as a place where we need to invest in health. And there have been these amazing campaigns with amazing candidates over and over in Texas, where the country gets transfixed on Texas for this brief moment before the election. But the problem is, between elections, what do we look like? The work that a party does has to be building infrastructure on the ground, building relationships on the ground, building teams of volunteers who actually know their neighbors and have already built a relationship so that when they come to talk about a particular candidate, they already have trust. That is teams that look like the community, speak the same language of the communities in which they're knocking on doors. The communications infrastructure to make sure that barbed wire grows, that the candidates are spending time there, and that across Spanish language like radio and Black radio newspapers and across the new media outlets, that everywhere there's already trust and already relationships. So that when we have that amazing candidate, that we can come in on top of an infrastructure that's already been built. And that is what the DNC needs to do differently, to be a catalytic investor with the labor movement and other partners to build the infrastructure so then we can actually take off from a solid foundation.
Governor O'Malley.
Now, clearly, we haven't invested enough in Texas. I've not been on the DNC before. I am probably of the three of us, the one that is the fresh pair of eyes and the change maker. I'm looking, I see some great leaders that you have in Texas. Mayor Nirenberg from San Antonio, Senator Royce West. And it's pretty clear in talking to many of you and DNC members on the phone that there's a few things we need to do. Number one, we have to stop letting them shape the electorate. We need to get back in the business of direct voter registration. Number two, We cannot keep falling further and further within a shrinking blue perimeter. And by the way, Maryland is still the cobalt blue flame of hope. And the Democratic governor just elected the first African American born to the United States. But we have to get into direct voter registration again. We have to invest the dollars and the staffing in order to do that. Secondly, you will have a great staffer who is all about candidate recruitment, but you have one. We need to recruit candidates all across the ballot, not down the ballot, but all across the ballot, including the courthouses. And three, we need to make sure that we create donor circles in all of the states and in adjoining states so that we can invest in people running for state legislatures. We need to take back our states in order to save the United States.
Members of the DNC have told us that they want additional input and transparency in the management of the party's finances. Chairman Martin, we'll start with you. What financial oversight, input, and transparency can members of the DNC expect if you are?
Well, let me just say, it's a shame how business is done down there. I've been an officer, a vice chair of the DNC by virtue of being elected by my peers at the state parties as the president of the ASTC. And people ask, well, you must know what the budget is at the DNC. No, I don't. Never seen the budget, never seen a financial report, never seen an audit report. I've never seen the contracts. That's gonna change when I'm done. And it's gonna change because transparency is really important, especially at this moment, right? There are a lot of people who gave a lot of money this last election, over $2.5 billion spent on the presidential campaign, $10 billion just in 24 alone spent on Democratic campaigns in the ecosystem. A lot of people are frustrated that we lost, and there needs to be transparency on how that money was spent and what our budgets are. Ben says this all the time, and I agree with him. Our budgets are a reflection of our values. And we need to open them up and show people that we're living our values, both in the way we contract, both in the vendors we're choosing, and how we're spending our money. All of that is important. I often think of the Wizard of Oz. Remember when they pull back the curtain and it's just that little guy behind there twirling all those knobs? When you do that, you take the mystery away. Pull back the curtain, bring some transparency to this so people see that no one's trying to hide the ball here. And there's some accountability because again, it's a lot of people. It's grandmas and labor members and others giving $5, $10, $15 a month to help fund this party. They deserve answers on how that money is spent.
Thank you. Chairman Whitman.
It is time for a huge transparency upgrade. I completely agree. And this is, it's striking. We're all running for DNC chair. None of us has seen the budget for this organization yet. We are walking into terra incognita when it comes to this. And what we all know is that there's a lot of work to be done. And the way that we build trust is by having transparency and then laying out a plan for what we're going to do, and then doing it, and then reviewing together what we just did. That's how you build trust over time. So that starts with budget transparency for DNC members. It involves changing how we communicate with donors at every level to explain what our plans are and explain what actually happened. But there's another piece too, which is to have input on what those plans actually are. And to me, this is the key thing. In Texas, so many folks that I've heard from have shared, there are 7 to 8 million people who are registered who didn't vote in this last election. There's a huge turnout mobilization problem to make sure that once someone's registered, they go out and cast a ballot. That requires infrastructure on the ground. In my state of Wisconsin, we have same-day voter registration, so it's a whole different picture. We should listen to the folks who are closest to the fight to build a battle plan in each state. And Texas is quite a state. It's kind of 5 Texases in one state. To make a plan here that works for Texas, and then do it, show that we get it, and that's how we build trust for the next time.
A couple of weeks ago, I laid out a first 100-day plan for the rapid turnaround that we have to effectuate in the DNC. We have to acknowledge where we fell short, which is why on day 5, I'll appoint a committee to do a deep dive after action report on the election. But on day 10, 2 task forces. One, on how we do a better job recruiting young people into this party. Secondly, though, is a task force on openness, transparent governance at the DNC. I think it's appalling that people never see the budget of the DNC. We have to change that. Within 80 days, this is not a study it for a while sort of thing. We are going to be open and we are going to be transparent. I wrote a book called How to Govern for Results in the Information Age, Smarter Government. The key to leadership and governance is trust. And there is no trust without openness and transparency. I happened to talk to a number of people that gave a lot of money to the campaign this last time. And they said, where did it go? Until you're able to tell us where it actually went, don't come back and ask us to do more. And that's also true of our volunteers and everybody else that gives to the party. We have to be more open and transparent if we expect to restore trust and restore it quickly.
Gentlemen, we know that the next chair of the DNC will need to raise literally hundreds of millions of dollars to build and fund a competitive opposition party. How will you raise the money to fund the DNC's work? Can the party fight for working class people, undo some of its losses with lower income voters, call out Trump's relationship with billionaires like Musk, Zuckerberg, and Bezos, all while raising money from your own wealthy big dollar donors? And is there an inherent conflict here that impacts Democrats' brand and strategy? Chairman Wickler, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. If we want to win elections, we need to win the trust of working people across race and ethnicity, across the country, in Texas and everywhere. And to do that, we have to show that we're actually fighting on the side of working people, even if that means that a special interest might make a few less $1 billion a quarter. And the striking thing in this moment is that people who donate to Democrats, some big donors and many, many small donors, they are so hungry to win elections. So I actually think we're in a moment now where we lay out the plan to win and we work with folks on the ground who understand what is happening on the front lines. We show that we're actually making changes and listening to people as we do it and diversifying who we're working with and how we communicate. That we can lean into the fights, that earn that trust, that make a difference for working folks. There might be some people who walk away because they have a particular interest or whatever, but we're going to earn so much more troops from so many more people that we'll be able to supersize the resources we can bring to these battles. We've done this in Wisconsin, that there were several right-wing billionaires that super funded the Republican Party that allowed Republicans to rig our state. And we've been able to quintuple fundraising in our state party to raise more money than any other Democratic state party has in the history of the country to fight back on behalf of working people in partnership with the labor movement. We must do that nationwide, and I think we can do that if we lean into this fight in the right way now.
Governor O'Malley.
Yeah, we have to do both. I see Robert Broker here, he's from Boston and was a member of that finance committee that did an outstanding job raising money for this last election. Did you know that 75% of the dollars raised actually came from small dollar donors? Notwithstanding the fact that we tend to hit them with scary nails again and again and again and again, instead of engaging in the conversation that can lead to more people wanting to communicate with us rather than more people wanting to put us on a spam blocker. So we have to raise money from individuals, all individuals. We have to be able to do both. We should also be clear about our principles. We shouldn't take dollars from people that are valid opponents of our principles. Not many of them come knocking on our doorstep, do they? So we have to be able to do both, but the more we can dial up the small dollar donors and actually do it well and do better than the other people, especially when it comes to digital communications. Good Lord, they were running circles around us this last campaign. We were knocking on millions of doors, but they were already inside the doors through trusted people online where people get their news. So we have to be able, I raise money nationally as the head of the Democratic Governors Association. 3 years of record fundraising. You have to make a decision which of the three of us is most likely to be able to raise the amount of money all across the nation in order to take this fight to Donald Trump and win back these next elections.
Thank you.
But let me just say, I do think it's important to make sure folks know on the record here. Ben's raised about $230 million for his state party. I raised about 220 for mine, and Governor O'Malley's raised about $95 million in total in his career. And so it is important. We've all raised money, and we've all done a good job with it, right? In addition to raising money, I served on the Harris-Walz Finance Committee. It raised an additional $6 million for a presidential candidate. But let me get to the question. because we're all prodigious fundraisers. We all bring that skill set to this campaign. The reality right now is you have the oligarchy controlling this country. The three richest men in the country were sitting right behind the president as he was sworn in. It's not the top 1%, it's the top 100 of 1%. Their combined wealth of this new cabinet is $460 billion. We have to stand up and fight, I agree with Ben, for working people. And that means we have to make sure that folks know we're only going to take money from people who share our values. We need to get dark money out of politics. We need to end Citizens United. We need to bolster our small dollar fundraising capacity so we don't have to rely on high net worth donors to fund all of our efforts. Make no mistake about it. When I'm the next DNC chair, we will not take money from people who are fighting against unions and working people. We will not take money from people who are polluting our environment. We will not take money from people who are standing in the way of people trying to exercise their freedoms and their liberties over their own healthcare decisions. We will only take money from people who share our values, and we will raise money the right way so we can give people faith again that their democracy is not bought and sold by the rich and powerful in this country.
We were not able to respond.
Yeah, I think the stakes here are so big for our country. I only want to say that, when you were one of the 7 battleground states, there was a lot of dollars that people put into those states. And each gentlemen are to be applauded for raising the dollars into those 7 battleground states. But all of America is a battleground right now. All of America is a battleground. And we need to make sure that we have the ability to raise the dollars, to restore trust, and to do it in a way that assures people that this is not business as usual as it's always been done in the DNC.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now let's talk about, please go ahead.
I love it. I mean, each of us and so many people in this room have been involved in fundraising because you have to raise funds to be able to support this work. I do think that what we've done in Wisconsin with events like when we had the cast of The Princess Bride read the script, we raised $4.5 billion with an online fundraiser and more than 100,000 people participating. That brought a whole new group of people to support this kind of work. We've been able to figure out new ways to raise funds that have been replicated across the country, sometimes with folks on my team providing assistance to other states. So, we've raised more in 5.5 years than in 14. And I think we need to come up with new ways to make it exciting to support this work, not feel like a drag, not feel like an obligation, but feel like something inspiring that people want to be part of. And I think that's what they have the opportunity to do.
All right, now let's talk about President Trump. On Monday, Donald Trump was sworn into a second term in office. A little more than 48 hours later, he's already issued questionable executive orders that challenge the constitutionality of birthright citizenship and increase the likelihood of use of military force along our southern border. First, tell us what you think it means for Democrats to be the minority or opposition party in Washington under unified one-party rule of the federal government. How should Democrats brand themselves and communicate to voters as the opposition? And should Democrats actively seek out opportunities to work with President Trump, like Senator John Fetterman and others have indicated they will do? Please take up to 2 minutes to answer this important question. We'll begin with Governor O'Malley.
Members of Congress, members of legislatures, they have a duty to find coalitions and find ways to help people. And in our party, I believe that whenever there's an opportunity to actually strengthen the economic security, health, and well-being of families, the legislature needs to come together to find ways to do that. I do believe in this time, as the party of opposition, we need to make sure we fight every effort that Donald Trump takes that undermines that very economic security, health, and well-being of American families. We need to be consistent about that. There are so many things we can't be distracted by because each day there's going to be a new parade of horribles and things that break away from the norm. But we have to up our communications ability when it comes to that fight. The reason we lost the last election was because so many people who work the hardest in our economy just to get by felt like we weren't talking to their economic concerns at their own kitchen table. So when now we are in opposition, we have the opportunity to push back and bring it right back to the kitchen table every time he does things like signing an order so but the drug companies can raise the price of prescription drugs. That's where we need to punch back hard, punch back consistently, and also do it online with trusted messengers. Second, there are really things he does that attack the core value we share as Americans, and that is our belief in the dignity of every single person. And we need to be uncompromising in our commitment to that principle. Let us not be among those that remain silent while other groups of people are attacked. Otherwise, there'll be nobody to stand up for us. And third, we need to fight for the republic we carry in our hearts. Because in a republic, nobody's above the law. Those are the three lines of counterpunch, opposition, and counterattack that's going to allow us to win the next election 2 years from now.
Chairman Wickler.
I agree with a big core piece of this, which is the job of the party, when you're the minority party, is to become the majority party. And that means our job is not to hug Donald Trump on stuff as a Democratic Party. The job of the party is to point out the things that Trump is doing that the vast majority of this country absolutely hate and reject, and make those the center of the conversation for people across the nation. Trump used a shock and awe strategy, and we know enough about Trump to not be shocked, but we also cannot let ourselves be awed. We can't be divided, going in a million directions at once. There's work on the governance side. Attorneys general and governors are now suing to stop the birthright citizenship order. Then his attacks on people's gender identity are outrageous, and we need to make sure that folks' very existence is honored by people who have the power to do it in public office and in the national conversation. And working people across this country who don't pay attention to politics voted for Trump to bring costs down. And he signed that executive order to push costs up, to allow pharmaceutical companies to rip people off. And if we come out of this week and every American knows that Trump broke his oath, his promise on day one, and sided with special interests against working people across all our communities, then we will have succeeded as a party. Because this week will hurt Donald Trump and Republicans' chances going forward instead of helping it. So we need to use our megaphone to bring a lightning focus on the things that crack the Republican Party, because most of their voters do not want the plutocracy that Trump and his best friends want to build. They want a country, most people, no matter their politics, and people who hate politics, they want to be able to support their lives and get through the day. And we need to be the party that fights for that the way people feel in their gut.
Ditto. Let me say, we're in fierce agreement on this, but in 2016, someone said to me, the Republicans are shameless and the Democrats are spineless. Think about that for a moment. If we're not willing to stand up right now, and of course, it shouldn't shock any of us in this room what's been happening the last 2 days, because he told us he was going to do this on the campaign trail. I think it's a shock to most Americans because they didn't believe him. We believe him, which is why all of us were working so hard to make sure he was defeated. But the reality is that we don't fight back right now, when the stakes are so high for so many Americans. How in the hell is anyone ever going to believe us when we say we're going to fight for them in the future when we're in power? You see, we have to resist Donald Trump right now. We have to show people who have given up on our party because we speak out of both sides of our mouth. My old boss, Paul Wilson, used to say, never separate the life you lead from the words you speak. There are too many hypocrites in both parties who say one thing and then get into power and don't do anything to deliver. The reality is, when we get in power, we've got to make a difference in people's lives. We've got to use that power to actually show them that we give a damn about what they're going through and we're going to fight for them. So part of it is resisting for sure. We've got to resist Donald Trump with every fabric of our being, because people's lives are going to be shattered and communities are going to be destroyed. We also have to, at the same time, and I know we can do this as Democrats, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to give people a sense of who we are. We have to define ourselves. We have to give people a vision, a positive vision of what this country would look like if they elect Democrats. And then when they give us the chance again, we damn well better deliver.
It's one thing to hold President Trump accountable, but I'd like to ask the candidates about an issue I've reported on extensively, which is accountability for members of your own party. Last year, U.S. Senator Bob Menendez was convicted in a corruption case for accepting bribes. Closer to home in Texas, Congressman Henry Cuellar has been indicted on charges of bribery and money laundering. And just down the block at the state capitol, my own reporting over the past decade has revealed multiple accusations of sexual harassment and worse to legislators like State Senator Boris Miles. Chairman Wickler, what do you believe is the appropriate role for the DNC in holding Democratic officials accountable when they have violated the public's trust? How can you expect to earn the trust and confidence of voters if they believe the DNC will look the other way when its own party's elected officials are accused of breaking the law?
We need to earn trust by showing that we mean it with our values. You can say a whole bunch of stuff, but if someone violates those basic values and you say nothing, then all of your purported values don't mean anything. And this is something that I've had to do in Wisconsin when we had an elected official who was found to have sexually harassed someone. I worked with the legislative leaders, and we made very clear that that person should step down. And ultimately, that person lost the primary after deciding not to step down. I think as a Democratic Party, there have to be some clear lines. And that doesn't mean rush to judgment. It doesn't mean going out of, it doesn't mean constantly acting as though we're holier than thou, but it means having some bedrock principles about right and wrong and making clear what those are. That's not necessarily good or bad politics. It's just the right thing to do. And I think that in the long run, doing the right thing is actually good politics.
Governor O'Malley.
Yeah, I used to be a prosecutor and I was also a defense attorney. When people do bad things, they need to be held accountable. We rely upon the Democratic leaders in our legislatures or governor's offices, but I think we're talking, mostly legislative leaders here, federal and that state. And we have to be very, very careful after what we've experienced now with Donald Trump and also the hollowing out of reporting on our various state houses and local government and state government. I mean, you can practically, you can shoot buckshot down the roll bowling balls down what it used to be the hallway where the press hung out at the State House in Annapolis. You won't find any reporters down there now. We have to be very careful and fight against the temptation to think that Donald Trump has lowered the bar for everybody. Donald Trump's lowered the bar for himself. We don't have to choose to lower that bar for our country. And we, and the DNC, needs to make sure that we are with our party leaders, that we do a great damage to our party's reputation in the eyes of the people if we don't move expeditiously, yes, with due process, but quickly when people do bad things in elected office.
I think one of the reasons we're at this moment in our democracy where there's such a low trust in politicians and institutions and parties is because you do have a lot of people who try to hold the other side accountable, but when it comes to their own party, they turn the other way. Ben's talked about his role as the governor has as well. In Minnesota, we've had to call out a number of elected officials, some at the very top of our party. And we hold you accountable. And I've been the first one to do that. Because I can't then turn around and try to hold Donald Trump accountable and talk about the rule of law and how important it is to our party if we're actually ignoring it in our own house. And so there's not much more I could say on this, but you've got to live your values. You've got to live your values. But people just feel like you're saying one thing and doing another, as I said earlier, they lose trust in you. Ben said this earlier, for people to trust our party, we've actually got to model the type of behavior that we expect of everyone else in our communities. We got to give them a sense that we're going to hold people accountable throughout up and down in our party, right? I don't care if they're the highest of high in our party, right? We've got to make sure that they're held accountable through our values and to societal norms.
Thank you. Gentlemen, we will now move on to questions from our audience.
Hi, thank you all for submitting questions in advance when you signed up, as well as when you got here through the QR code. I've selected a few to read. It is clear after the cycle that media environment is incredibly fractured and voters are not relying on the same traditional news sources as they have in the past. We've seen a rise in the power of creators on platforms like YouTube, podcasts, and TikTok who command massive followings to shape the narrative. What are your plans for the DNC to engage in this shifting media space?
O'Malley?
Thank you. I propose that we create an information war room at the DNC. Think of it as a center of excellence for digital communications. We have to up our game in our ability to provide all of our candidates, all of the state parties with the tools they need, with the technology, with the techniques, with the information, with the marketing analysis, and also message testing, which we now have the ability to do in ways that we never did before, to do it inexpensively, to do it rapidly, and we have to also recruit those creators, more influencers. We have to bring into our party the next generation, because they're natives. That's how they communicate already. There is a correlation between what a poor job we do of recruiting the next generation of Democrats and the poor job we do of communicating online. We have to meet people where they are at, and we can't do it if we're not creating an agile every 2 week battle rhythm in the center of the DNC that then can emanate out. We also need to make sure that we hire people who are expert at digital communications in every state party. Because without that capacity, then the state parties can't be empowered to do what they need to do to meet people online where they're at and communicate all over the next 2 years, not just in the 3 weeks before the election.
Chairman Whitler?
I think we all agree it's essential that we actually look at where people make sense of the world, where they get their information. We show up to those places, we do it long term. I want to share that this has been a lot of my life's work and the work that we've done in Wisconsin. I launched a podcast before the podcast boom. Not the best timing, learned a ton about how to build a big audience online, worked to move on to change how we did our online organizing and communication. And in Wisconsin, we work with influencers, micro and macro influencers. We work with creators across the country. We work to supersize the narrative around the fights that we choose to identify. Fights, not just the big presidential campaigns, but things like our state Supreme Court race in 2023, which Republicans poured money into, more money in that race than had ever been spent on both sides of any judicial election in American history, but where we were able to fight back and win in a landslide. And our team at our state party has actually gone on to the presidential campaign, to national roles, to leading national organizations, because we've innovated in a state party. And I want to do the same thing at the DNC. We need to be a 21st century party. And that means actually showing up in different platforms that shift every week and every month. If you're not on TikTok, you're on Red Note now. If you're not on X, you're on Blue Sky. We like to be in all the places where people actually spend their time on their phones, on their screens, in the world that they live in, not just the world that we want people to be paying attention to. Political news shouldn't be like broccoli. It should be where the fun and excitement is.
Chairman Martin?
I agree 100% with what Ben has said. And I think the key to what he said is being nimble enough to realize that it's ever changing. It's constantly changing, this landscape, this communications and information landscape that we exist in. You know, I'm a hunter. People ask me all the time, well, where do you go to hunt? They think I'm gonna stay in the woods or it's my favorite deer stand. No, I go where the deer are, right? The reality is we need to go where the voters are. Where are they getting information, right? And we know that it's different across age strata. I'm 51 years old. I still read a hard copy of the newspaper every single morning. My kids think I'm crazy, right? They get all their information from TikTok, right? The reality is we have to do an information consumption survey to understand across age, across demographic, where people are getting information, so then we can go meet them where they're at. And it has to be nimble enough to Ben's point to recognize that that's changing all the time. You know where the Republicans kicked our butts? 2020, right after that election. They started an incessant drumbeat in all of these online spaces, podcasts, dating services, online spaces, even online dating apps. They used micro-influencers. They paid them to spew out the misinformation, disinformation, and lies. And for 3 years before we ever even revved up our communications machine, they had already defined us before we defined ourselves. We can never allow that to happen again. We have to do what Ben's done in Wisconsin, everywhere in this country.
For the first time since the election of Ronald Reagan, Democrats lost voters in the bottom third of income earners. What is your analysis of the brand challenges Democrats face now, and how would you fix it as chair?
Let's start with Chairman Rutler.
For the last 4 years, so many Democrats have fallen into this trap of telling people who are yelling about how frustrated they are, about how the economy is not working for them. Democrats have been saying, no, actually the economy is great. You don't understand. Look at the GDP statistics. Everything's fine. I don't think that works very well. And I think what we have to start with is actually listening to people. And as we've been saying, and meeting them where they are. And then once we understand where people are, we can help explain how we got there, because there is a bad guy in each of these fights. So many people who got support from the child care tax credit, from bills that were passed by Democratic votes, the stimulus check Donald Trump signed, it was a Democratic idea. And then the money went away. And Democrats never pointed out that it was Republicans who killed that support. When people's income went down at the same time as prices went up, that was Republicans' fault. And when we think about what we do, a lot of times Democrats actually do walk the walk. They do the right thing. They don't talk the talk in a way that shows people that they're fighting the fight. And that's where we need to change. And we need to learn from the union movement, because unions understand that the first question is, whose side are you on? You need to show people that you're on their side of this fight. You need to go to the places where they're having these conversations, and you need to visibly fight for things that make a difference in people's lives if you want to be able to earn their trust. And that's the core challenge Democrats need to do to be able to earn back trust across all our communities with working people across this country.
Chairman Martin.
Thank you so much. Look, some of you have heard me talk about this before. Last spring, there was research that came out. This should have been the canary in the coal mine, a giant red flag for a Democratic Party that showed for the first time in modern history the perception of the two political parties has changed. Now the majority of Americans believe that the Republican Party best represents the interests of the working class, or the Democratic Party is the party of the wealthy and the elites. And sure enough, just to prove the point, the only two groups that we overperformed with in this last presidential election, wealthy households and college-educated voters. That is a damning indictment on our party. That's not who we are. And I will tell you, as the only card-carrying union member on this stage who comes from a working class background, I can tell you, my father-in-law, who's a beef cattle farmer in southern Minnesota, voted for Obama in 8 and 12. He voted for Trump 16, 20, 24. My brother, who's a union carpenter, same thing. Voted for Trump 16, 20, and 24. We are losing too many people who've been part of our coalition because they do not feel like we're fighting for them anymore. And the way we get back is focusing on a working class agenda, on an economic agenda that gives people a sense that we really understand their economic pain. We're not just sympathetic, we're empathetic, because we've lived those experiences. I've lived those experiences of not knowing where your next meal is going to come from, not knowing where you're going to sleep at night because you don't have a house. We need more leaders in office who understand that. And we need a Democratic Party who understands that. We talk too much in stats and facts and reasons. We don't tell enough damn stories to give people a sense we really understand the pain that they're going through. That's how we connect again. Not by all these stats and facts and reason, but through personal stories and lived experiences. When we do that again, we will give people like my brother and my father-in-law a sense that we know what's going on in their life.
Thank you. Governor O'Malley.
Yeah, so speaking of stories, true story. When I was running for re-election as governor of Maryland after the recession, 2010, my well-intended media consultant said, please do not tell people that we're making things better. Nobody feels better now than they did before the recession. And I said, I know. And we have to acknowledge that. We have to say, we see you. We understand. We understand your struggle. We understand what you're going through. And then, and only then, we'll be able to make the argument that we are on your side, therefore. And these are the actions we're taking to make things better. And that's why we need to keep going. We used to travel all around my state In a green Winnebago, we would literally strap a kitchen table to it. Now, my volunteers would carry it out like it were the presidential seal or something, set it out before the talk in a church basement, what have you. And I say, you know what this is? This is the most important place in our state. We have to publicly acknowledge, once we elect a new leader of this party, that we failed to speak to your concerns. We have to promise the American people that we're going to change our party to change our country in order to do a better job of fighting for them, for the better future that they're working so hard to give to their kids. And that's the narrative arc. Not fact after fact after fact beaten into your head. That's the narrative arc for the next 2 years.
Thank you, gentlemen. We've got one more important audience question.
I know this is important to a lot of people in the room. Rural Texans and rural voters nationally are a core part of the winning coalition. How will the DNC invest in rural voters?
Let's start with Chairman Martin.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm really proud of our work on actually not only writing the 57 state party strategy, but coming up, Jamie Harrison and I created the Red State Fund with acknowledgement that we have to do more in red states, right? We have to do more, and it's not enough. Brenda and I both agree we have to do significantly more there. And I think part of the challenge, of course, reflecting on my father-in-law's experience for a moment, right? You know, he's a beef cattle farmer. He's farmed this land for 135 years. He's got, and when I asked him about why he voted for Trump, I was expecting to get an answer about farm policy or something like that. But you really start to understand, like many people in small towns throughout this country, he started talking about the fact that his family, my wife included, weren't going to come home to farm the land that's been in their family for 135 years. That the high school that he went to is closed up, so he doesn't have a Friday night football game to go to anymore. The clinic that he takes his wife to for her health care is closed, so he's got to drive 50 miles to find health care, right? And you realize, here's this man, 85 years old, should be carefree, living out the last days of his life, right? But he's got a knot of anxiety in his gut. He's worried about his future, and he feels like his identity has been taken away from him, and he feels like people have forgotten about him in his community. Part of this is showing up, being present, investing, and making sure that we give people a sense that we haven't forgotten about them, no matter where they live in this country.
Governor O'Malley.
Yeah, another story. I met some of you, I saw Larry on, and I've seen others here that I've met during that period when we last did this to ourselves, from 2016 to 2018. I created my own leadership pack, much to the annoyance of my friends, because they kept asking me for money, in order to travel the country, to go to so-called red states, and to be able to campaign with and knock on doors with and bring attention to candidates that were running for state legislative offices, sometimes in districts where they didn't even file a Democrat before. So if we want to be connected, if we want a rural strategy, we got to recruit people from rural areas and small towns to run for office. Candidates actually connect our party to people in places. And it's not just the state legislature. If you have a neighbor that you know that you vote for one of the courthouse offices, administrative offices, it's a lot easier then to take their word for somebody else that's running for a policy office, say a state legislative office. But we have to recruit candidates all over the country, and it's a sad truth. And in the lead sponsors of abortion ban bills in Texas, Mississippi, and Ohio did not even face a Democratic opponent in the very next election. We've got to win back our states to take back our country.
When national reporters write about rural areas, it's usually shorthand for rural white working class voters. And you can tell a lot of them have not spent much time in the Rio Grande Valley. There's a myth that rural voters are monolithic. And there's incredible diversity among rural voters, among rural counties. There's totally different economies, different cultures all over this country. And if we want to get this right, we need to organize from the ground up everywhere. That's what we've worked to do in Wisconsin. Wisconsin very, very white state, but there is a significant Latino population in rural Wisconsin. There's a big Hmong population in rural central Wisconsin, and we organize everywhere with folks on the ground. And we've been able to add votes in 2024 in rural counties. Most rural counties added votes for Harris relative to Biden. Wisconsin was one of the few states where Democratic turnout went up in this presidential election because we were organizing everywhere. While it fell in Maryland and Minnesota, and those states across the country. And it doesn't mean you win every election when you do this. It means that year over year, you can build the trust that allows you to win more elections when the moment comes. And that's exactly what we need to do in Texas, that people in this room have been doing in Texas. And that's what a national party needs to invest in, a plan in each state to organize from the bottom up on a year-round basis to build the trust, to build the infrastructure in rural America and the rest of America to be able to win elections and win the future. That's what we should do together.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, there's one more from me. The Democratic coalition is not exactly represented on the stage today. None of the candidates here are people of color. All are men, the youngest in his 40s. None of y'all have worked in the service industry or building trades in a long time. How are you the right people to lead the Democratic coalition and to ensure that experiences, values, and priorities of young people, people of color, working class folks, queer folks, and women, all of whom the Democratic Party must engage in order to win, are reflected in the party's work? Governor O'Malley, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your invitation and also the call of your question. And there's actually a much broader group of candidates who are going to be on the forum tonight. We've done 2 forums. We've had the Black Caucus Forum, which was interesting. It was done jointly with the LGBTQ caucus forum. So I had served as mayor of Baltimore. When I ran as mayor of Baltimore in 1999 with more hair, more of it black, I had a come from behind victory that shocked people. In fact, the Washington Post the next morning greeted my come from behind victory over 2 better known African American candidates with the headline, "White Man Wins Mayor of Baltimore." And then they apologized the next day for it, which was ironic because it was 100% accurate in what it said. I have worked with very diverse communities my whole life. Maryland is a very diverse community. And our party's greatest strength is our diversity. The key to collaborative leadership, collaborative servant leadership, is the ability to be present and with, and to understand, and to put yourself in the shoes of other people, to realize that each of us is important, each of us brings a different story to this tapestry of democracy. And it's a humbling honor to be able to run for this office. And I ask people to judge me by my work and by my record and make their evaluation as to which of the 9 of us would be best to lead this party.
Thank you, Governor. Chairman Martin.
Yeah, thank you. And, look, we are all white guys. I'm a middle-aged white guy. I can't change that, right? But what I can say is that the way I've led in my party is to make sure that we, both as it relates to our staffing, as it relates to contracts, as it relates to our outreach and organizing, that we reflect in everything we do the great diversity of our party. And Governor O'Malley's absolutely right. We're just 3 of 9 candidates. There are 2 women, one by Dr. Hathaway, a woman of color. There are other candidates that bring different lived experiences to this race and are here tonight. That said, I will say that it's really important for the next chair of the DNC, if it's one of us 3, and I think it will be, that they reflect on the fact that we come from a place of privilege, but we represent a party that with so much great diversity, with so many great people that we should be bringing in, and we have to be intentional about that, both in contracting, both in the way we do our organizing, both in the way we do our hiring, and in leadership positions, so that our party looks like the people that we are trying to win over. Representation matters, and intentionality matters here. And again, I agree with the governor. Judge us on our actions, not our words. I think most of us have records of making sure that we are reflecting the great diversity of our bigger party.
Chairman Micklin.
I think the key thing for each of us is that the DNC chair, Jonathan, is to help other people win elections. And the most important election is going to be the sum of a whole bunch of elections to determine whether Leader Jeffries becomes Speaker Jeffries in 2026 by winning a House majority with what will be the most diverse House caucus across the United States. We've worked to elect Democratic governors, and most Democratic governors, last time I checked, were women across this country. We worked to elect and support Democrats running for office at all levels that reflect the full diversity of our coalition. To do that means having a whole leadership team that reflects our whole coalition across race and gender and ethnicity and gender identity. It means ensuring that the people on the team, the vendors that we work with, the organizers that are out talking to the voters that we need to connect with, then all of those levels reflect our fundamental commitments and the full coalition that does this work. But fundamentally, we're actually not at the center of this work. And I live this every day in my state, as I know Ken wants to do in his state. In Wisconsin, we've been able to dramatically expand at every level of office, the diversity of our candidates, the people who hold and actually wield power in the public interest and in the public trust. And I think it's incumbent for the DNC chair to recognize both the privilege that the underprivileged that they have, but also that their job is to make sure that the Democratic Party fights for, includes, represents, and is able to lift up folks of all skin colors, of all backgrounds, because that is what makes this country great.
Thank you, gentlemen. You can each do 2-minute closing statements. We'll do seat order, so starting with Chairman Martin.
Well, we have an amazing opportunity in this moment. In every crisis, there's an opportunity, and it's to reimagine the DNC. There's so much that's still unpacked from this last election. We don't have all the data or the answers at this point. But what I do know is, over my 34 years in politics, I've seen a DNC that has not been organizing in a way that's building long-lasting and durable infrastructure to help us. As I mentioned before, what is the role of a political party? It's singular. There's no brownie points coming in second place. You can't improve people's lives as at the end of the day, you lose. We have to win again. Our national party has to win again, and that's because it's some sort of sport and we just pat ourselves on the back or put a check mark on the board and congratulate ourselves. Winning and losing is a difference in so many people's lives. So many people who rely on our party to build power for them. We're hoping that we elect people who share their values and our values so they'll make a difference and maybe make their lives a little bit better. That's what all of us are fighting for. That's what all of you are fighting for. The reality for me is this DNC can do so much more in partnership with all of you on the ground and so many throughout this country. If we would only reimagine. This is our opportunity to do that together. I'll leave you with this. This may disqualify me in some of your eyes, but I don't have all the answers. I'm both excited and terrified at the same time. I've never been a DNC chair. These guys have that. I don't know what's waiting for us now. But I have a plaque in my voice that says none of us are as smart as all of us. And I believe that all of us can figure out any of the challenges that this Democratic Party is going to do, and we can overcome. So thank you so much for having me tonight.
We're in this crisis moment now as a country. We're watching the hammer blows rain down from the White House. In Texas, you've been experiencing this for a long time from your state government. And we're in a moment where people, if you ask the general public, they don't really trust either party. There was a headline about how trust in the Democratic Party was at an all-time low of 33%. And someone pointed out in the comments that trust in the Republican Party was 36%. People just don't trust our political system right now. And if we want to build change, we have to build trust. And if we do that, then we can think bigger. I think a lot in this work, we think about 2026, midterm elections, and 2028, the presidential elections. If we do everything right, we get a federal trifecta. We can pass the national laws that we've been waiting for. We can finally pass the Women's Health Protection Act and end Texas's abortion ban and the Protected Right to Organizing Act and end election and the Felonious Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. We can do all that. But then the next year comes. And 2030 could be like 2010, when Republicans sweep in a backlash and then rig this country for the next decade. And I think our job right now is to build a party strong enough that not only can we win elections for these next 2 election cycles, but we can shift the center of gravity and build the kind of enduring coalition that can win the next decade beyond. And this has to run through Texas. There's a reason that we're here, because the vision for building the kind of country that everyone deserves a chance to live in, it requires us to do this work with a national party as a catalytic investor, to work with the union movement, to work with our partners and our allies across this country in this state, to support the work that you do every day, to be able to win that trust and win up and down the ballot the way we can change the entire future trajectory of this country. You are on the front lines. We're not really counting on you. We have to show up in solidarity with you every step of the way for the years to come. And if I'm the DNC chair, you have my commitment that we will do exactly that. Thank you.
All that we need depends on change. And this election for DNC chair is definitely a change election. We can kid ourselves and pretend that if we just do a little better in 7 battleground states next time, it'll all fix itself. It's not going to fix itself. We have to fix it. We have to embrace the truth that this is a moment for change. The party's future, our country's future, depends on the new South. It depends on Texas. It depends on the Lone Star State becoming the North Star State. When you all have 42 congressional votes, you are going to become the great state that determines our nation's future. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we have the courage to change? Do we really have the courage to make investments in voter registration, to up our game when it comes to digital communications? Or do we want to keep doing things the way we have been doing things? What I offer you as your next chair, if you should so choose, is someone who has proven his abilities as an operational turnaround change leader at every level. In the city of Baltimore, the neighbors of my city voted for me because I promised we would change. And we did, and we made our city a safer and better place, and I was reelected. As governor, we passed and got a lot of important things, some of them like the living wage done for the first time, because we changed the operations of our state. And President Biden tapped me to go to Social Security, the largest domestic program in America, not because things were going well, because it was on a steep downward trajectory, and we turned it around. That's what we have to do. We need you, Texas. Thank you for coming out here. If we have the courage to embrace this moment and vote for change, we can save our country. I need your help, and I thank you for being here tonight. Thanks a lot.
This concludes our Democratic National Committee Chair Candidates Forum. Thank you, Ken Martin, Martin O'Malley, and Ben Wexler for your spirited participation. Thank you to our co-hosts, the Texas Democratic Party and Way to Lead. Thank you for joining us in person or over the live stream. I'm Olivia Messer, and you can read our work at thedarkwire.com. Good night.